Just before she passed away, the former Graceland maid who spent 10 years within Elvis Presley's inner circle finally spoke out, and what she revealed shocked fans. For over 4 decades, Nancy Rooks kept the king's secrets, never speaking about what truly happened behind Graceland's closed doors. But in her final moments, she made headlines with a simple declaration: "It's time to tell everything." What followed was far from the heartfelt tribute people expected. Before her death, Nancy exposed a side of Elvis few had ever seen, and it wasn't all positive. What exactly did she witness, and why did she keep it hidden for so long? Before Elvis Presley became a global icon, Nancy Rooks saw him in the most ordinary light. She didn't meet him under spotlights or on stage. She met him barefoot in the kitchen, yawning and asking if there was any bacon left. Hired in 1967 as a maid and cook at Graceland, Nancy quickly found her role evolving into something far more personal. Over the years, she became a quiet constant in Elvis's private life, witnessing everything from quiet breakfasts to emotional meltdowns behind closed doors. Graceland was more than a lavish estate, it was a house full of shifting moods. On some nights, Elvis wandered the halls deep in thought, pacing at 2 a.m. On others, music echoed through the rooms, and Nancy found herself singing gospel tunes with him while she cooked. "How Great Thou Art" was his favorite. He'd sing it loudly and grin when Nancy joined in, frying pan in one hand and dish towel in the other. To the world, he was a superstar. To Nancy, he was simply Mr. Elvis, always polite, always respectful. "He was raised right," she would later say. Despite the chaos of phones ringing constantly and people coming and going, Elvis treated her with kindness. But life inside Graceland wasn't easy. Nancy worked irregular hours, staying up late to match Elvis's ever-changing schedule. If he wanted biscuits, sweet potato pie, or bacon at 3 a.m., she was ready to cook. She didn't just clean, she helped him dress, laid out his outfits, set up the pool area, and adapted to a world where days and nights blended into one. Her loyalty and adaptability kept her close to Elvis, even as she saw more than anyone realized. Years later, Nancy wrote a memoir titled Inside Graceland, Elvis's Maid Remembers. It was a gentle, humorous account filled with love, never scandal or blame. But even then, she left some things unsaid. In quiet interviews, she admitted she'd held back certain details, secrets she felt the world wasn't ready for. It wasn't fear that kept her quiet, but loyalty. Still, fans clung to every word she did share, eager to understand who Elvis truly was away from the cameras. Nancy's recollections painted Elvis as obsessive about cleanliness, showering multiple times a day. He preferred his bacon extra crispy, his eggs perfectly scrambled, and always seemed to be scanning his surroundings, as if searching for something just out of reach. But more than trivia, Nancy gave fans perspective. Her story stripped away the legend and revealed a man, one who laughed, cried, overate, and sometimes didn't speak for hours. Despite the fame, he kept his circle small, and in that circle, Nancy held a quiet yet vital place. She never sought attention, but near the end of her life, she hinted there were still untold truths, parts of the story she'd kept buried. When she finally said, "It's time to tell everything," those who knew her sensed that something long hidden was about to surface. What had she been holding on to? What did she witness that stayed locked away for decades? The morning of August 16, 1977, seemed ordinary, at first. Elvis had been up late the night before, playing racquetball with his fiancée, Ginger Alden, and his cousin Billy Smith. When he returned to Graceland in the early hours, Nancy was already in the kitchen. She recalled him standing on the steps, clearly exhausted but still courteous. She offered him breakfast like she always did, but he declined. "No, I don't want anything to eat now," Elvis said. "I just want to get some sleep. But I would like some water." Nancy didn't think much of the request. The night was hot, and he had just finished playing. She sent another maid, Pauline, upstairs with a jug of ice water, the kind with a handle, like those used for orange juice. It seemed like just another small moment in a house full of them. But Pauline noticed something strange. Elvis grabbed the jug and drank urgently, quickly, as if he couldn't get enough. "I ain't never know him to grab that water and drink it like he drank it this morning," Pauline said later. Nancy dismissed it at the time. He's probably just tired from racquetball, she said. But deep down, something about that moment stayed with her. Around 9:30 a.m., Nancy heard a loud thump from upstairs. It wasn't exactly a crash, but something about it felt off. She paused, waited, and listened. No screams, no cries for help, no commotion, just silence. The kind of silence you try to convince yourself means nothing. So, she carried on with her chores. Nearly 4 hours later, at about 1:50 p.m., the intercom buzzed. Ginger's voice was unsteady, barely coherent. "Who's down there? Something bad has happened up here." Nancy felt a chill run through her. "What is it?" she asked. Ginger began crying, and that was all it took. Nancy instantly knew this wasn't minor. It wasn't a dropped object or a small accident. It was something serious. She dropped the phone and ran upstairs, her heart racing with every step. She turned into the hallway and entered the dressing room. There, on the bathroom floor, lay Elvis, face down and motionless. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What is this?" She didn't scream or freeze. She immediately rushed back downstairs to find the Memphis Mafia. People had to be informed, quickly. As the truth began to set in, confusion gave way to panic. An ambulance was called. People were distraught, but Nancy remained composed. When the medics arrived, they struggled to navigate Graceland's layout. Nancy took charge, guiding them through the house, up the tight staircase, around corners, over obstacles. She showed them where to go and how to move. When they finally brought Elvis down, Nancy caught one last glimpse of him. He looked just like he was asleep, she recalled. But he had already been gone for a while. Blue spots marked his face. Everything after that blurred: sirens, news cameras, crowds gathering. The world lost Elvis Presley that day. But Nancy lost Mr. Elvis, the man who once stood telling jokes while she hemmed his pants. As the media frenzy began, Nancy kept to the background. The official statement was cardiac arrest, simple and final. Yet even then, some things didn't add up. Whispers started circulating, about pills, about strange timing, about what really occurred between the moment Elvis drank that water and when Nancy found him. Back then, she said nothing. She let the authorities handle the situation. But years later, Nancy revisited that day with a new perspective. This time, she didn't stop at what she saw. She opened up about her suspicions, her regrets, and the things she might have unknowingly helped cover up, the secret she held onto for decades. After Elvis's death, Nancy remained silent. Not because she had nothing to share as she did, but because there were certain boundaries you just didn't cross, especially in Memphis. Not when your life had been so closely tied to someone like Elvis Presley. She had seen fans travel from across the globe just to stand outside Graceland. She had seen people cry over him as though they'd lost a family member. Nancy understood that kind of grief. She felt it too. That may be why she chose silence instead of feeding speculation. But silence can be loud. Nancy continued working for the Presley family, helping turn Graceland from a private residence into a public museum. Still, one area of the house stayed off limits to visitors, press, and most staff: Elvis's private upstairs quarters. According to Nancy, they were cleaned only once or twice a month to prevent dust buildup. There was an unspoken rule: don't linger, don't ask questions, don't comment. You go in, clean, and leave. Each time Nancy entered those rooms, she felt a shift inside. She walked the same floors, passed the same hallway, entered the same bathroom where it had all ended. As she folded clothes or wiped surfaces, the memories of that morning came flooding back. She rarely talked about it publicly or in detail. In the 1990s, she wrote a memoir, Inside Graceland, Elvis's Maid Remembers, full of warmth and fond memories. She shared funny stories about his eating habits, his music, his odd routines. But the final chapter, the one everyone waited for, remained vague. For the general public, it sufficed. But those who knew Nancy noticed things. Subtle pauses in conversation. A distant look in her eyes when sensitive topics came up. Once, she reportedly said, "If people knew what I know, they'd never hear his music the same again." It wasn't a threat, just a quiet warning. As the years passed, questions persisted. Why were details about the timing of Elvis's death unclear? Why were certain prescription bottles allegedly removed before authorities arrived? Why was the toxicology report revised multiple times? And why didn't the people present, including Nancy, provide more clarity? The truth is, she tried, quietly and in confidence. A few close friends claimed she confided in them, always asking them to keep her words private. She spoke of items in the bathroom that didn't belong there. Ginger had been too shaken to explain anything clearly. And some in the Memphis Mafia didn't want outside interference. One story even suggests Nancy was told to straighten up the room before medics came, though she never confirmed it herself. Over time, the weight of it all took its toll. Nancy wasn't bitter, just burdened. And when health problems emerged later in life, something changed in her. In an interview just a year before her passing, she said, "I did my duty for the family. But I think someday, before I go, the truth needs to be told." It wasn't a threat, it was a release. People had always believed that Nancy shared everything in her memoir. But what if the most crucial detail was the one she chose not to reveal? What if she had witnessed more that morning than she ever let on? What if her silence wasn't only out of loyalty, but also from guilt? Decades after Elvis's passing, Nancy's final words began to sound different, not sentimental, but urgent. She had dedicated her life to preserving the legacy of the man she worked for, but near the end, she suggested that doing so may have required hiding part of the truth. And she no longer seemed sure that had been the right choice. In the months before her death in 2022, Nancy Rooks made a quiet but powerful confession. She didn't make a public announcement or issue a statement, that wasn't her nature. But those close to her noticed a change. She became more contemplative, more candid. Then one day, she said something no one expected from the woman who had kept Elvis's secrets for more than 40 years, "It's time to tell everything." At first, her friends weren't sure what she meant. But slowly, it became evident Nancy was ready to share what she had carried for so long. Not for fame or attention, but to find peace. Nancy had always protected Elvis's image in public. She recounted sweet moments, funny memories, and details that made fans feel connected to him. But there were things she kept to herself, things she believed happened during those final days. A close friend revealed that Nancy had confided Elvis's condition was far worse than the public knew in the weeks before he died. He was struggling deeply. She said he was exhausted from the medications, and from maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. She went further. Nancy claimed that some of the drugs Elvis was taking weren't prescribed to him or were passed around carelessly by people close to him. She described finding new pill bottles in the trash nearly every day that summer. She remembered times when Elvis fell asleep mid-sentence, during meals, or in the middle of a conversation. Back then, she thought it was just fatigue. But later, she feared it pointed to something much more serious. There was more. Nancy opened up about something she had never spoken of publicly, what happened right after Elvis was found on the bathroom floor. When Ginger Alden called downstairs in tears, saying something terrible had happened, Nancy rushed up immediately. She saw Elvis lying face down, motionless, and froze. Then she acted, running back down to alert the Memphis Mafia. But before the paramedics arrived, someone, she never named who, told her to tidy up a bit. At the time, she didn't question it. She wiped down a counter, moved a towel, straightened a few things. It seemed innocent. But when media scrutiny ramped up and questions about pills and timelines emerged, she began to understand what she may have been part of. "I didn't know what I was covering up," she allegedly said. "I just did what I was told." Those small acts, the fast gulp of water, the thud she heard that morning, the quick cleanup, stayed with her. She told herself they meant nothing. But in her final months, that certainty faded. And that's when she revealed something she had never written in her book, something that changed everything. Elvis didn't just die. He faded. And no one stopped it. That statement lingered. In her final days, those around Nancy noticed a heaviness, not from what she had done, but from what she had kept quiet. Had her silence protected Elvis, or had it protected those who let him deteriorate? With her words, "It's time to tell everything," the narrative began to shift. Before she passed, the former Graceland maid revealed a version of the truth that hadn't been told before. It wasn't that Elvis was a bad man, but that perhaps the people around him had failed him. There were signs. Nancy had seen them. And for too long, she pretended she hadn't. The aftermath was unexpected. When word got out that Nancy Rooks had left behind more than recipes and fond recollections, the reaction was slow but powerful. Just like how she had moved through Graceland, quiet, watchful, unnoticed, the news spread softly at first. But once people understood what she had said, or hinted, the shock began to ripple. Reactions were mixed. Some fans refused to believe it. To them, her original memoir was sacred, faithful, simple, and loving. Now, that same loyal housekeeper was being quoted as saying Elvis didn't simply collapse, he faded. And worse, that she may have unknowingly participated in a cleanup that altered what responders would see. The idea that someone close to Elvis had altered the scene, even with good intentions, reopened old wounds. The official cause of death had always raised eyebrows, a sudden heart attack, yes, but questions lingered. The mix of medications in his system, the delay in calling for help, the lack of a complete toxicology report, all resurfaced with new intensity. Online forums buzzed with theories. Seasoned Elvis biographers and fans re-examined the timeline. Had Nancy really been told to clean something up? What had she witnessed that morning? Why had she waited so long to speak? And who, if anyone, had told her not to? Still, others admired her honesty. They viewed her late-in-life confession as an act of bravery. After years of silence, Nancy Rooks had spoken, and the consequences of her words are still unfolding. Maybe in protecting the Presley legacy, she came to understand that truth and respect didn't have to be at odds. Fans had a right to know Elvis wasn't invincible. Even kings fall, sometimes slowly, sometimes quietly, often with help from those too scared to intervene. The Presley estate stayed silent. No statements were made. Graceland kept running tours, selling memorabilia, playing his music. But for those who had worked with Nancy, those still behind the scenes, there was a quiet shift, an unspoken feeling that something had changed. A boundary had been crossed, not out of betrayal, but out of love for the man they once called family.